Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. I did a long form video yesterday about the Ipsos Mori poll, how we laughed at that, knowing that it was completely a load of old rubbish, because Ipsos, of course, are so biased towards the SNP. And why shouldn't they be? After all, they're paid £5 million a year out of government money, that is to say, taxpayer money, to come up with these incorrect figures. And I mentioned that 5 million figure in a flash video I followed up with later in the evening, wherein I also mentioned the fact that there was a new poll, subsequent to the Ipsos Mori one, that was much more accurate, and indeed was the worst polling for the SNP ever, where they were shown to have possibly only 17 MPs after the next election. And you know what, folks? With a bit of careful due diligence, with a bit of tactical voting, and with a bit of care, and holding your nose and voting for other parties that you may not necessarily agree with, but just to get the SNP out to benefit everyone, we could possibly get them down to single figures, and that undoubtedly would bankrupt the SNP. But we'll have a look at these two stories now. We're going to start with the new poll, simply because it's such a great way to start the day, and I think that you all deserve a nice happy start to this wonderful, for me anyway, wet Thursday morning. Here goes. Before we get into it, I would just like to say thank you very much to everyone who's recently subscribed. We've actually come down to a wonderful point where under 60% now of my regular viewers are yet to subscribe. So it's coming up. It's nice to see that a lot of the regulars are now hitting the subscribe button. But it would be a massive, massive help to the channel if the remaining ones would do so. And if you are a regular viewer, do please hit the subscribe button, because it really does boost the channel, because we're political, get pushed down. Your subscription lifts us again, and it just makes sure that we get out and get wide and people see the message and hear the truth, rather than what comes out from the Ministry of Propaganda within the SNP government. So do please hit that subscribe button. Really does help the channel. And of course, like the videos. That's always good. Anyway, SNP Glasgow general election wipeout. This is predicted in a new polling, as Humza Yousaf's party would sink to just 17 MPs across the whole of Scotland. Now, that's based on the polling result, but that can be changed if the good people of Scotland look to see where there's an SNP seat, where there's currently an SNP MP, look to see who is in the second position, look to see who's the biggest challenger. And regardless of your political persuasion, vote for the person who's likely and strongest, and the one that's most likely to defeat the sitting SNP MP, and get them out. Because ultimately, if it's one term, you can live with it. But by doing this, and this is the best time ever to do it, by doing this now, hitting them out, getting these MPs out, that's all those MPs not there. They're not getting the short money, and they're not getting the feed money from the MPs. It would bankrupt the SNP. They literally rely on their politicians handing money over, and the short money that comes from Parliament for having so many MPs. You wipe them out, get them into single figures, and totally wipe the SNP from history. And never again with their poisonous, dangerous, toxic left-wing, I mean, not just left-wing, Labour left-wing, we're talking extreme left-wing, politics of hate and division, ever soil and sully the Scottish political landscape again, and put some sanity back in to politics. Anyway, the SNP is predicted to finish 1% behind Scottish Labour, according to new polling, but this could lead it to lose 26 MPs, including the likes of Alison Thewlis, Anam Kazir and Tommy Shepherd. Now, there's a personal little joy, of course, of losing Anam Kazir. After all, it cost a lot of money to get her into her position. Allegedly, money that was supplied in the form of envelopes stuffed with cash. We all know that story. And so for her to lose it would be seen as a bit of a waste of an invested an investment. Someone's made that big sort of cash payout, trying to get, perhaps, allegedly, his daughter to become an MP for whatever reason. We'll leave that to your imagination. And for her to be voted out would just be delicious. And you can do it, folks. You can do it. Anyway, new polling has brought a new nightmare for Humza Yousaf, as it predicts that the SNP will lose the majority of their MPs and be stuck on just 17 seats. Come on, we can get them even lower. The Nationalists won 48 in 2019, but this has fallen to 43 after a number of defecations. Oh, thereby hangs a tale. Defections and one lost by-election. And the hellish start to the leader's reign is set to continue, with Redfield and Wilton putting Labour 1 point ahead of the SNP at the next general election. And when put into electoral calculus, a complete wipeout in the former yellow stronghold of Glasgow is predicted. Can you imagine Glasgow not having a single SNP MP? It would be the final humiliation. I think a result like that would force Humza Yousaf to resign. He would have to go. But of course, the trouble is that the SNP, especially the backbenchers at Holyrood as well as at Westminster, will be, let's just say, mindful of the fact that it has crashed and burned so spectacularly under Humza Yousaf's watch. And a lot of them will actually be blaming him personally, because he's not a leader. He's incapable of making decisions. He doesn't like to lead from the front. He certainly he makes all the wrong decisions, and so they'll be looking at him and thinking, can we ditch the Greens? We need to ditch the Greens. And he's saying, no, we need him to lead on this, and he won't lead on this. And so it may even be that not only will he go after a terrible election result, they may ditch him beforehand, because they see how awful he is and how he's leading them to the most spectacular of defeats. Whereas if they can get rid of him now, before Easter, say, put a moderate in like Kate Forbes, that may lift people. It may stop the rot. It may bring a few more back to the fold, because she would immediately dump the Greens. And that would maybe bring some of the more moderates who object to what the Green policies are back into the fold, and maybe raise them up. And that's the likelihood now. But it would also be a wonderful, wonderful scalp to pull, to get Humza Yousaf gone. He, of course, was the what's the word I'm looking for here? Not the official. There was no official candidate, but he was the establishment candidate, wasn't he? He was continuity Sturgeon. And of course, the whole party machine went in to get him in, but even then, he only just scraped over the line by his fingernails. Without all that pushing by the party, he wouldn't have done it. The thing is, now there's that buyer's remorse where they've realised they've done this to push him into to winning it, and he's not as good as they thought, not by a long mark. Anyway, Mr. Yousaf's own constituency is in Glasgow Pollock, although he himself lives a long way away. He doesn't want to live in Pollock, does he? Lives over in Dundee. There's no way he is going to be moving into Pollock to be near his people, as it were. He worked hard to get the hell out of it, anyway. So this is a stark warning that his own seat may be in trouble at the next Holyrood election. And the pollsters put Anna Sawal's party on 34% and the SNP on 33%. But like I say, the good people of Scotland can completely turn that just by tactical voting. And it's something I know Craig Houston has mentioned as well. So when you go and see his video on this, he will also tell you, vote tactically, hold your nose and vote tactically and get them all out. Very wise decision. Anyway, the Tories are further back on 18%. That's followed by the Lib Dems on 8%. Reform is on 4%, which is startling for such a small, recently formed party to get and command that amount in Scotland. The Greens are on 2%, and for the first time, Alabama polled 1%. Well done, Alex. Well done. I'll tell you why. Because that 1% that are voting for Alex aren't voting for the SNP. I'd like to see Alex get up to maybe 4%, 5%. The more people that switch to Alex Salmond, the better. Because that also, of course, will pull votes away from the SNP. Because there are, and you've got to accept this thing, there are people who support independence. And I respect that they have that view. I don't agree with it, but I can respect that they have the view that they want independence. And that's fine. That's their view. I'm not running them down for having that view. What I'm saying is, for heaven's sake, don't give us an SNP independence, because that would be truly destructive for Scotland. But fine, now you've got a couple of options, because you've got Alba and you've got the Greens. The Greens are Marxists, of course, but it's a couple of options where you can vote for an independence party, but not vote for the SNP. So you can vote independence, but not a toxic SNP party. And so they will still have the same amount of votes going for an SNP candidate, and they can claim, oh yes, well look, independence, but we voted 46% of people voted for, whatever the line will be. But they're not voting in the SNP, which just pulls the SNP back a little bit more. So we should really start be pushing Alex Salmond, the voice of reason, as it were. I mean, he's not, but he's at least not as toxic and not as mad and not a lunatic as the current lot in the SNP, with a few exceptions, of course. But anyway, Mr. Yousaf's own popularity ratings plummeted to -17. His joint lowest ever approval rating in this company's Scottish polling. And the survey happened between February the 3rd and 4th, meaning it was done after the Scottish Government figures gave evidence to the UK Covid Enquiry. And it's the first one that came after it. And at that point, I said about a week ago now, I think it was, that we were waiting for that first poll after the Covid Enquiry. I said that'll undoubtedly show that it will have dropped even more. And bang, it is. 17 is the lowest prediction ever for the SNP. And so, yeah, you heard it here first, folks. I did call it. I did say it'd be the worst one ever after the Covid Enquiry. And boy, was it. A huge 42%, we'll round this off now, a huge 42% of Scots disapprove of his performance, which is an increase of 5. And only a quarter of Scots think he's doing a good job. But I think they must be mentally ill. Which is 6 less than before. So he's falling. Even with his own supporters are falling. This polling is hugely different from the Ipsos Murray results released earlier yesterday, which put the SNP on 40 seats and Labour on 17. 40 seats. My arse. It was never going to happen. The company also put Ipsos. Oh, yes, sorry. Ipsos Murray. The company also put the support for Skexit at 53%. Once don't knows are removed, with those wanting to stay in the union at 47%. And it also suggests the SNP holds a 7% lead over Scottish Labour at the next general election. And that, of course, is absolute bonkers. Absolute rubbish. It's never going to happen. There he is, a man who is now entering the last days of his leadership. How very sad. Let me cry out of one eye. Coming up. So there we are. It's the worst ever poll for the SNP. It's a terrible poll for Humza Yousaf. He knows he's at the end. He knows he cannot win. And he knows that he will be asked to resign if he doesn't actually resign. He knows his days are numbered. He can see the writing on the wall. And he also knows the worst possible result, which is Kate Forbes is likely to take over. And the moment she does, the Greens are gone. This party of Marxists that he seems to think are so good. The Greens are gone. He will be dumped out and back to the back benches. He will no longer have power and he will be humiliated. And I think he may even leave politics. I think he knows that he's never going to work again as a cabinet minister, because he's yesterday's man and he's proved to be a serial failure. Nobody is surprised at this. Nobody's surprised he's failed as leader. He's failed at everything else, so why not fail as leader? But it is going to be the worst possible result for the SNP in many a long year. Goes to show what happens when you put the likes of Humza Yousaf as party leader. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video, and until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.